What you can't control, God already has covered. You see, we spend so much of our lives fighting battles that were never assigned to us, trying to fix situations that were never meant to be in our control. We toss and turn at night, replaying moments in our minds, thinking if we had said something different, done something sooner, or tried a little harder, the outcome would have changed. But the truth is, no matter how strong you are, how smart you are, or how much faith you think you have, there will always be things in this life that are completely out of your control. And those are the very things that God has already taken care of. You don't have to see His hand to know He's working. You don't have to feel it to know it's real. God specializes in the unseen, the silent, and the supernatural. While you're pacing the floor, wondering how it's all going to come together, heaven has already drafted the blueprint. While you're crying over doors that closed, God has already opened new ones that you can't see yet. And that's why He said, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still, not because you don't care, not because you're giving up, but because you trust that even when it looks like nothing's happening, something divine is taking shape behind the curtain of your circumstances. So many people are exhausted not because of what they're doing, but because of what they're trying to control. They're tired of being God in situations that only God can handle. They're tired of trying to manipulate outcomes, fix people, predict the future, and orchestrate peace in storms that only the Creator can calm. And the more they try to control it, the more it slips away, because God will not compete with your need to control. He will step back and let you see that your efforts will only carry you so far. He'll, the weight of worry, humble you so that you'll remember who's really in charge. Sometimes God allows situations to get completely out of your hands just to show you that they were never meant to be in your hands in the first place. You thought it was your job to fix your child, to save that relationship, to change that coworker, to make people understand you. But the moment you realize you can't control hearts, timing, or outcomes, that's when faith becomes real. Because faith doesn't begin until control ends. As long as you're still trying to manage it, you don't need faith. But when your back is against the wall and there's nothing left to do but trust, that's when God steps in and says, "Now watch me work." Think about Joseph. He didn't plan the pit. He didn't schedule betrayal. He didn't choose the prison. But while he was worrying about the pit, God was planning the palace. Every uncontrollable twist of Joseph's story was still completely under divine control. He couldn't stop his brothers from turning on him. He couldn't control Potiphar's wife's lies. He couldn't speed up the timeline in the dungeon. But God had already covered every step. The same God who was with him in the pit was with him in the palace. The same God who let him be falsely accused also made sure his name would one day be remembered with honor. And that's how it works for you too. You're sitting there thinking, "This doesn't make sense, Lord. Why me? Why now? Why this?" But you don't have to have the answers. You just have to have assurance. Because even when it looks like you're losing, heaven is aligning. Even when people walk away, God is making room. Even when you can't control the pain, God is producing purpose. Nothing slips through His fingers. What looks like chaos to you is choreography to Him. Sometimes God will let things spin out of your control so that you'll finally stop depending on your own strength. You've been trying to do it your way for too long, and He's saying, "Will you let me drive?" You're clinging to the wheel of life, swerving through worry, gripping tight to what you think you can manage, but the moment you loosen your grip and let Him steer, peace will flood in like a river. Because the same God who formed the stars and told the seas how far to go doesn't need your help to hold your life together. He's already holding it. You can't control how people treat you, but God has already covered you with favor. You can't control when opportunities will open, but God has already scheduled divine appointments that no one can cancel. You can't control the delay, but God is using that delay to develop your patience, your faith, your endurance. You can't control the storm, but you can trust the one who walks on water. We love control because control gives us comfort. It gives us the illusion of power. But the truth is, real peace doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender. And surrender doesn't mean weakness. It means wisdom. It means you've lived long enough to know that you can't handle everything, and you've learned to place your confidence in the one who can. You've got to stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting God's order. You're not losing control. You're transferring control. You're saying, God, I'm tired of fighting battles that belong to you. I'm tired of worrying about what I can't fix. I'm tired of trying to predict what only you know. Because when you truly trust that what you can't control is already covered, you stop panicking and start praising. You stop worrying and start worshiping. You stop asking, what if, and start declaring, even if it doesn't go the way I planned, God is still good. Even if they don't understand me, God still knows my heart. Even if I don't see the answer yet, God is still working behind the scenes. That's the kind of trust that moves heaven. That's the kind of faith that makes the enemy nervous. When you stop reacting to chaos and start resting in confidence. When you can stand in the middle of uncertainty and say, I don't know how, I don't know when, but I know who, because what you can't control, God already has covered. And listen, sometimes God doesn't show you everything because He knows you try to control it. He hides certain details to protect you from yourself. If you saw the full picture too soon, you'd start rearranging it to fit your logic. But faith means walking without all the answers. It means saying, Lord, I trust you even though I don't understand you, because trust is not tested when everything makes sense. It's tested when nothing does. Worry is rooted in fear, but faith is rooted in surrender. Worry says, what if it doesn't work out? Faith says, even if it doesn't, God still got me. Worry says, I need to figure this out. Faith says, God already has it figured out. Worry tries to control. Faith chooses to release. And the more you release, the lighter you feel, because you were never designed to carry what belongs to God. When you wake up and the weight of the world starts pressing down, remind yourself, this is not mine to carry. When anxiety whispers, you have to fix this, respond, no, I just have to trust. Because every time you try to control what's uncontrollable, you're saying, God, I don't believe you can handle this. But when you release it, you're declaring, I believe you've already handled it. You're not alone in this. Every person who ever walked by faith had to face something they couldn't control. Abraham couldn't control when the promise would come. Moses couldn't control Pharaoh's heart. Ruth couldn't control her loss. David couldn't control Saul's jealousy. But in every situation, God had already written the outcome before the problem even began. The same is true for you. The story was settled before the storm started. You might not see how it's going to turn out, but you can rest in knowing that the author of your life doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't edit your story based on your emotions. He doesn't panic when you panic. He doesn't change his plan just because your feelings changed. His word is settled. His promise is sure. And his covering is constant. Stop letting the things you can't control dictate your mood, your peace, your worship. If God has already covered it, you don't need to carry it. You don't have to micromanage miracles. You don't have to supervise the supernatural. You just have to trust, because if He brought you this far, He's not about to abandon you now. What you can't control, God already has covered. Your future, your family, your finances, your health, your purpose, your destiny. You may not know what's next, but you can know who's next to you. And if God is for you, it doesn't matter what's against you. So lift your head, breathe deep, and let go of what's not yours to hold. The hands that formed the world are strong enough to hold your life. The same God who hung the stars in place has every detail of your situation under control. You don't have to understand His timing to trust His heart. Rest in that. Because while you're worrying about how it's going to happen, heaven is saying it's already done. While you're stressing over the unknown, God is smiling over the outcome. He's already gone ahead of you, already made provision for what you'll need, already written the ending that brings Him glory. Stop fighting battles that are already won. Stop rehearsing fears that God has already silenced. Stop carrying loads that grace has already lifted. You don't have to fix what's already finished. You don't have to control what's already covered. You can breathe again. You can trust again. You can rest again, because the same God who took care of you yesterday is still in control today. And what you can't control, He's already covered. Worry blocks faith, but trust unlocks peace. There's a reason the enemy loves to plant worry in your mind, because he knows that if he can get you to worry, he can stop you from walking by faith. Worry is faith in reverse. It is believing that something bad is going to happen instead of trusting that God is going to work it out for your good. Worry doesn't move God, it paralyzes you. It traps your spirit in a cycle of fear, doubt, and restlessness. And while you're busy imagining every worst case scenario, heaven is whispering, if you'll just trust me, I'll take care of it. Worry and faith cannot live in the same heart at the same time. One will always silence the other. When worry rises, faith retreats. When faith stands tall, worry loses its grip. The question is, which one are you feeding? Because the one you feed will grow. If you keep feeding your fears with negative thoughts, with what ifs, with endless scrolling and comparing, worry will take over your soul. But if you start feeding your faith through prayer, through the word, through worship, you'll feel peace start to push worry out of your heart. Peace doesn't come from everything going right. It comes from knowing that even if everything goes wrong, God is still in control. You can't wait until life is perfect to stop worrying, because life will never be perfect. You'll always have something you can stress about: your family, your job, your finances, your health, your future. But peace is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of God in the middle of them. It's that deep, quiet confidence that says, even though I don't know how this will work out, I know who's working it out. Worry is loud. It screams in your mind, it shakes your spirit, it steals your sleep. But faith whispers, it doesn't shout. It simply says, God's got this. And sometimes you have to make a choice to stop listening to the noise of worry and start leaning into the whisper of faith. Because when you stop rehearsing your fears and start declaring your trust, you'll begin to see that the peace of God isn't something you chase. It's something you receive. You can't experience peace as long as you're clinging to control. The tighter you hold on to your plans, the harder it is to trust God's promises. You keep saying, I'm waiting for peace, but peace doesn't come to control. It comes to surrender. It's not about God removing the storm. It's about God calming you in the storm. Because the real miracle isn't when the waves stop. It's when you can sleep through them. Jesus didn't panic when the storm came. The disciples were losing their minds, screaming, "Master, don't you care that we're about to die?" But Jesus was asleep. Why? Because peace isn't determined by the size of the storm. It's determined by the size of your trust. Jesus trusted his Father so deeply that even the storm couldn't shake his rest. And that's what trust does. It anchors you when everything around you is chaotic. You can't stop every storm from coming, but you can decide whether or not you'll let it shake your soul. Worry magnifies the storm, but trust magnifies God. Worry makes the problem bigger, but trust makes your perspective stronger. Worry keeps you stuck in panic mode, but trust invites peace into your heart. And peace isn't something fragile, it's powerful. It's what gives you stability when everything else is shifting. The enemy knows he can't take your promise, so he tries to take your peace, because if he can get you to live in constant worry, you'll never have the strength to walk in faith. You'll be so focused on what could go wrong that you'll miss what God is doing right. That's why the Bible says, be anxious for nothing, not because God doesn't understand your fee, but because he doesn't want fear to rule your heart. He knows that anxiety steals your clarity, blocks your joy, and blinds your faith. When you trust God, peace becomes your posture. You walk differently, you speak differently, you stop over-explaining yourself to people who don't understand your journey. You stop trying to rush what God is still developing. You stop letting every delay feel like a denial, because you know that every not yet is still part of his perfect plan. Worry will always focus on what's missing. Trust focuses on what's promised. Worry says, I don't have enough. Trust says, God is my provider. Worry says, what if I fail? Trust says, even if I fall, God will lift me up. Worry says, it's too late. Trust says, God can redeem the time. When you live in worry, you make fear your counselor. When you live in trust, you make faith your guide. God never asked you to understand everything. He asked you to believe. And that's what trust looks like. Believing that even when the pieces don't make sense, the puzzle is still complete in his hands. You see, peace doesn't come from getting all the answers. It comes from being okay with not having them. It comes from saying, Lord, I may not know you're doing, but I know you're doing something good. When you stop worrying and start trusting, your whole atmosphere shifts. Worry brings heaviness, but trust brings lightness. Worry drains your energy, but trust renews your strength. Worry makes you reactive. Trust makes you responsive. Worry tries to control tomorrow. Trust is content with today. Jesus said, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. In other words, every day has its own grace, its own peace, its own provision. When you worry about tomorrow, you miss the peace available for today. Some of you are living in the what ifs. What if I fail? What if they leave? What if it doesn't work out? But the peace of God is found in the even ifs. Even if it doesn't go my way, he's still faithful. Even if I don't understand, I'll still praise him. Even if I don't see the outcome, I'll still believe he's working. That's trust. That's the kind of trust that unlocks peace so deep that worry can't even find a foothold. You don't need all the answers to trust God. You just need one truth, that he is good and he is with you. Every time you choose trust over worry, you're saying, God, I believe you more than I believe my fears. You're declaring that your peace is not up for negotiation. You're telling the enemy that no matter how loud the storm gets, Your heart will remain anchored in the one who speaks to the winds and they obey. Worry looks at what's happening around you. Trust looks at who's standing with you. Worry stares at the size of the mountain. Trust remembers the size of your God. Worry rehearses the pain of the past. Trust rests in the promise of the future. And every time you shift from worry to trust, you make room for peace to flow. The peace of God is not fragile. It's not shallow. It's not the kind of peace that depends on perfect conditions. It's a peace that stands tall in the middle of chaos. It's the kind of peace that lets you smile through the storm, worship in the waiting, and rest when others are restless. It's a supernatural peace, one that surpasses understanding. It doesn't make sense to your mind because it comes from your spirit. It's heaven's response to your trust. Some of you have been praying for peace, but peace doesn't come through more effort. It comes through more trust. You've been saying, God, calm the storm, but maybe God is saying, I'm trying to calm you. Because the truth is, sometimes the storm doesn't stop because the storm isn't the problem. Your worry is. When your heart finds peace, even the storm starts to lose its power. When you trust God, you don't have to chase outcomes. You just follow obedience. You stop asking, how will this work out? And start saying, Lord, what would you have me do right now? Because trust is not passive, it's active. It's not sitting back in fear. It's stepping forward in faith. It's believing that every step you take in obedience leads you closer to peace. Even if the path doesn't make sense. Worry wants to control. Trust wants to release. Worry wants to predict. Trust wants to surrender. Worry says, if I don't do something, it'll all fall apart. Trust says, if I don't trust God, I'll fall apart. There's freedom in letting go. There's power in saying, Lord, I don't understand this season, but I refuse to let worry rob me of my worship. The most peaceful people aren't the ones who have perfect lives. They're the ones who have perfect trust. They've learned how to stop wrestling with the unknown and start resting in God's sovereignty. They've been through enough storms to know that panic doesn't change outcomes. It only drains your peace. They've learned to sit still and say, God, I trust you even here. If you want peace that lasts, you've got to evict worry from your heart. You've got to tell it. You've lived here rent-free for too long. Every time worry knocks, let faith answer the door. Every time fear speaks, let trust respond, because you can't hold on to worry and expect to hold on to peace. One has to go. And when you finally choose trust, peace will come flooding in. Not a fragile peace that breaks under pressure, but a holy peace that guards your heart and mind. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on outcomes, but on the one who never fails. The kind of peace that says, I don't know how, but I know who. So breathe, release it. Stop rehearsing the pain. Stop overanalyzing the future. Stop trying to control what's beyond your reach. God is in control and He hasn't failed you yet. Worry may try to creep in, but you can say, no, I'm walking by faith this time. I'm trusting God this time. I'm choosing peace this time, because the truth is, the moment you trust Him, peace finds you. You don't have to chase it, force it, or earn it. It's already waiting on the other side of your surrender. So let go of worry and let peace take over. For worry blocks faith, but trust unlocks peace. You said expand 3 into 2,500 words without heading